Is it time for Jimbo Fisher to make a change at quarterback? All that and more on this episode of the Locked On Aggies podcast.
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Locked On Aggies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Joey Ikes, and I'm joined once again today by my good buddy, Cameron Honesty. And thanks for making Locked On Aggies your first listen. Cameron, it's good to have you back. It has been a tough few days for the 12th man in Aggie Nation. And it all comes back to the same question we've been asking for 9 months. What is the answer? And I guess the first question is there a quarterback problem in College Station?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can look at it from two ways. And this is the thing about college football, especially. It's very different from the NFL in that we've seen week one with the NFL, for example, that Aaron Rodgers had a horrible game. Aaron Rodgers is a future Hall of Famer, but he looked very bad out there. I mean, if you were someone from the planet Xeon and you came down, they're like, here's football, here is what you see, and you started watching him, they would go, this guy's not good at football, and you think, well, no, he just had a bad game. He's 0-1, but he's got 16 other games to play. In college football, you have to be basically perfect to have a chance to compete for a championship. So we look back at, when it was about a week before the season started that Haynes King was announced as the starting quarterback. You and I both were not too surprised. I think I was a little towards Max Johnson at the time. You were a little towards Haynes King, but in the end, we were like, okay, this makes sense. This is Jimbo's guy. We trust from what we've heard and seen in fall camp and throughout the summer that this guy's ready to finally take that next step and be a consistent presence in the pocket and be a guy who can lead this team to victory week by week. Well, we saw a little bit of that in week one, and overall the team didn't play very well. But we both came away again, and I think the general public and Aggie fans everywhere said, well, look at the stat line. I mean, Haynes had about 360-plus yards in the game. He had 3 touchdowns. He did have 2 interceptions. But, we gave him a pass because this was the first game he'd been in for about a year and a week or something like that. And so we kind of looked at that like, well, look, he's playing Appalachian State, and I'm not going to be the first one to say, like, I kind of pushed him aside and said, they have no way to come in there and do what they did. But I still gave him a better chance to have one of his best games against Appalachian State, against a defense in the Mountaineers who had given up 63 points a week prior. And so I didn't have a big I had no inklings that there would be another quarterback competition, because I thought they were on the right track and I thought he was going to fix the issues that we saw in week one. Well, after that game, we can talk about it coherently now, I think. So let me put it in pretty basic terms here, that he did not look good and he did not show up in crucial moments. And there were moments where, I mean, as surprising as it was after App State had scored the not go-ahead touchdown, but it looked like the go-ahead touchdown at the moment. It looked like he was going to win the game when they went up 14-7. Devin Awchain pulls heroics, runs back the kick for, I think it was 98 yards. We're all thinking, okay, finally, maybe some momentum is going to swing their way. A&M gets the ball back, after App State scored the field goal to go up 17-14. And Haynes had the chance to tie the game, drive to tie the game, or drive to score the game. And look, the drive at the end of it was not pretty. And it was something that when you are the starting quarterback for an SEC program and somebody that Jimbo Fisher puts all his trust in and has put his trust in for about a year, even when he was injured, I think he knew this kid's going to come back and be my starting quarterback. He did not look the part. And it was I'm not going to use words like disturbing. I mean, this is football. I'm not going to get that dramatic, but there were guys open I'm wide open in the middle of the field. I think Anais Smith was wide open. I think it was like a mini crossing route or something. He just missed him. He just didn't see him, or he overthrew him, and it was confusing. And I came away from that thinking, why is he scared? Is it the O-line? Is he not getting blocked for well enough? And yeah, we can say that, but there were moments where the blocking was fine. He just couldn't hit his targets. And is it a confidence thing? I don't know. But you know what? I've probably been talking too long about the game. And let's go back to your question. There is controversy right now. And mainly because if we're comparing this to last year, where we had Zach Calzada as the starter, and Zach was getting injured a lot. I mean, these were not injuries that were going to keep him out long, but these were injuries that were beating him up week by week. The only person behind him was Blake Boast, who was a walk-on. Okay, right now we've got Haynes King, and behind him is Max Johnson, who has started basically 2 full seasons for LSU, another SEC program who he has faced every team A&M has faced, and maybe he faced Georgia, I can't remember, but and then you have Connor Wiegman, who is a 5-star freshman who is as talented as they come. Who, look, I think that in this, and what we've seen from guys like Bryce Young and other young quarterbacks, you're not going to do damage by putting someone like Connor Wiegman in either right away. I think the only reason why Connor is third on the depth chart is because Max Johnson is there, and because, yes, Jimbo's offense, which is more pro style, is a little more difficult to grasp right away. But again, this is a different situation this year because of those guys that are behind Haynes King right now. If it were any other year, if it was Haynes King and a walk-on, well, we would basically be sitting here going, well, that's all we have. We have to hope for the best. But right now, if I'm Haynes King, I'm not sitting up at night, afraid that I'm going to lose my job right away, but I am worried because of the experience and because of the talent sitting right behind him.
Yeah, and one of the conversations that you and I even had right after they named Haynes King the starting quarterback was that playing Haynes King gave you the opportunity to have a really high ceiling at the quarterback position, while you knew that you had Max Johnson in the fold to provide a really high floor. And what it feels like the quarterback play against Appalachian State specifically was below the level of the floor that you feel like you would get if Max Johnson was your starter. And that is sort of the thing that that makes this a conversation, is that you feel like if Max Johnson was the starter, he probably has a little bit more. The only way that I can think of to describe it is he has a little bit more poise in the situation. And the thing that was a little bit scary to me, and I've said this a couple of times, is the game against Appalachian State looked too big for Haynes.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was a 2:30 kickoff against Appalachian State from the Sun Belt. And this week we have prime time against Miami. The next week we have prime time against Arkansas. The week after that we've got Will Rogers, Mike Leach, and Mississippi State. And the week after that we've got prime time against Alabama. So the stage only gets bigger.
Yeah.
And if it was too big for Haynes at against Appalachian State, what is it going to look like in those scenarios? What is it going to look like against a ranked Miami, against a really good Arkansas team, all those sorts of things? And to me, the word panic, I've said a couple of times, it just looked like he was extremely indecisive.
Yeah.
And that's in the running game and the passing game. And I've referenced the play where he just stuck the ball in Devon Achane's belly and just carried the mesh point all the way to the line of scrimmage and just refused to make a decision about whether he was going to pull the ball or carry. Mm-hmm. And there is some of that slow mesh stuff that is a sort of trend, but at some point you got to make a decision, and you either got to pull the ball or you got to give the ball and let your amazing running back have a shot at picking a hole and going. And that's in the run game, but the same trait showed up in the passing game where he doesn't. Everybody will acknowledge, I think, Haynes King does not have the quickest, most snappy release of the football in college football. As a result, he cannot in any way be hesitant about about making the decision for where he's going to put the ball, because he's got he's got to make up for that time that his release takes by making quicker decisions, being more decisive, and getting the ball out on time and on location. And it was abundantly clear against Appalachian that wasn't happening. And when you watched Appalachian on tape against North Carolina, it was not a scheme that should, at least, in my amateur opinion, put a quarterback in the washing machine cycle, the spin cycle about what decision he's going to make.
Yeah.
Like most of the decisions, most of the things, they're not a super disguised defense. The pressures, they bring a few different kinds of pressures, but none of it was, it's not what Alabama's going to throw at you. It's not what a Georgia will throw at you in an SEC championship game or anything like that, or Ohio State in a college football playoff semifinal or something like that. And so if the stage was too big and the scheme was too much from Appalachian State in this contest, it just paints a whole lot of shadow and doubt over what it looks like moving forward. Because the truth is, and Steve Sarkisian said this about the Alabama game while he was trying to downplay the importance, is that the outcome of that game really and truly in the context of the entire season doesn't matter at all. Because if A&M goes on and wins out, or even if they lose against Miami and win out in the SEC and win the SEC championship, they're going to the college football playoff.
Oh, yeah.
So they still control every bit of their own destiny in the scenario. All of the margin for error is gone at this point.
Exactly.
Especially once you get into conference play. And that's where this conversation now comes up. Is it time to go to Max because the margin for error is gone? Or is it time to go to Connor because, hey, the season might be lost anyway. Maybe we just go to Connor and get the freshman some exposure. Yeah. And maybe he gives you that ceiling you were looking for from Haynes. And maybe if the show's too big for Haynes, putting Connor in there, if the show's a little too big for him, it's not all that much different. And so for me personally, if I was Jimbo, I would have been having some really sleepless nights Saturday and Sunday probably before I had to face my team at practice on Monday and say, okay, this guy is the starting quarterback going forward, or Haynes get in there with, all right, first team offense and Haynes is out there running with them. So, that's just my thought. And we'll get a little bit more into the quarterback situation later in the week. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for all your pro and college betting needs and sports information this season. Find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week's games. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including the MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Speaking of BetOnline, Cameron, our friends over at BetOnline have, for what I've been able to find, the first time on the 2022 season, a full set of lines and props for an A&M game as they prepare to face Miami. Coming up here in week 3 in primetime in College Station. So we're going to go through these lines here and we're going to give our takes on it, for entertainment purposes only, as our way of previewing the game a little bit here together.
Yes.
We're going to go through these and use these sort of as our way to tell the story of the game. So we'll start with the spread on the game, the point spread. Our friends at BetOnline have A&M favored at A&M -5, which means they're giving 5 points to Miami. If you bet on A&M in order to win your money, A&M has to win by 5 points or more. Cameron, what do you think about this line? Do you think the spread is appropriate? You think it's too tight? You think it's too big? What do you think? What's your take here?
Well, you have to kind of look at perspectives. Immediately after the App State loss, I would have thought Miami's favored by 7 points. Like that's exactly what I would think, because Vegas would have lost complete, faith in Texas A&M after that, thinking, well, if you can't beat a Group of 5 team, how are you going to beat Miami? But no, it's a very realistic line, and it makes a lot of sense because we know that this is a night game in Kyle Field. I'm already hearing that we could reach sold out numbers already. It's gonna be a lot of people are going to that game. And as we have seen throughout the years during night games at Kyle Field, anything can happen. It doesn't matter who comes in there. It doesn't matter how good you are, what your ranking is. It doesn't matter at all. And I think Vegas almost might be looking at the quarterback situation in that, what we've seen from Haynes King, they might be making a change from a guy they know pretty well in Max Johnson. And that's the thing. Max Johnson was at LSU for two seasons.
Basically 2 full seasons as a starter.
Yeah, and played a lot of games, played a lot of big games, played against the Alabamas and the Floridas. And so, they know him well, and they know maybe he's going to be the spark for A&M offensively to get it going. But also on the other side, we've got Tyler Van Dyke, the quarterback from Miami Hurricanes, who's a legit 2023 NFL prospect. This is a huge game for him. This is a huge game for his head coach, Mario Cristobal, who came over from Oregon, who's a very well-known coach throughout college football, who, is trying to be the coach that brings the U back, brings them back to fame and fortune and elite nature. And so this is a big game all around. I don't think I can say any more. And outside of A&M circles, a lot of people say, well, this has lost its luster because, they lost last week. I don't believe that at all. I believe this line is perfect because I think this is going to be a close game, and I think it's going to be an interesting game. And I think that's pretty much where it should stay.
Yeah, for sure. And I think your comment about lost its luster has some merit.
Sure.
It hasn't lost its importance.
Exactly.
But it has lost its sort of, hey, this is the number 5 or 6 team in the country against the number 13 team in the country or whatever Miami's at now. And, college game days in town and all that. All that is gone. Yeah. And now it's, 2 teams outside the top 10 playing one another. A&M's coming off a really bad loss, all that stuff. So it's lost its luster. It has not in any way. If anything, it's gained importance for A&M. If A&M it beats Appalachian State last week and loses to Miami this week, people are like, yeah, they lost to a ranked opponent.
Sure.
If they win the SEC, everything's fine. Nothing changes. But right now, if A&M loses 2 straight going into the game against Arkansas at Jerry World, it's a whole different conversation that we're having about this A&M team. Exactly. And a lot of people are treating the Appalachian State loss like catastrophe in and of itself. So if you just compound that with another loss against Miami, and again, 2 straight home out of conference losses at Kyle Field, that's basically unprecedented for A&M.
Exactly. If we go to that side of it, then like you said earlier, the whole lost season narrative, and I'm glad we brought that up. I'm glad that we brought that up for everybody who's listening, that this loss, as bad as it is, does not end the season. It doesn't look great, but there's a reason why fans are coming out to that game. There's a reason why it's going to be packed, because that is a blip in the radar right now as we stand. Like you said, though, if you lose this game and then you go to Jerry World, it's a 6 p.m. I believe it's a 6 p.m. kickoff, they announced the other day. And it's another pretty prime time game against a very good Arkansas team that no matter how good they are, A&M could be the best team in college football. Arkansas could be the worst. They are going to always play you tough and play you.
They're going to give you a game
for
sure.
So yeah, that type of level is if you lose that game and that it compounds, then we're reaching that on a lost season type of thing.
Absolutely. At that point, we're having conversations about a head coach change, not just a quarterback change, which is unfathomable considering where we were.
Not something I want to
ago.
Touch anytime.
Right. Exactly. All right. Our next line here is the over/under on the point total for the game. They have it set at 45, which means they're projecting based on the point spread and the total line here an A&M victory in the neighborhood of 25-20 for the game. What do you think about the total of 45 points? What do you think that says about the offenses in this game, and what does it say about the defenses?
Yeah, and I think what it says is the type of offenses they run, and I've heard a lot of analysis about Texas A&M. I think Greg McElroy had a point about this isn't the same A&M running game that they had last year because they had kind of bruising running backs in Isaiah Spiller, kind of mixed with that speed, straight line runner, versatile guy in Devin Achane. But now it's really Devin Achane's show and some young running backs behind them. So I think that the point total does kind of signify the offenses for both sides is that it's a little unknown for A&M. What are they going to focus on this week more than they did last? Because last week the offense was anemic, and we didn't really see any consistency aside from the 26-yard touchdown run from Devin Achane, and then obviously his kick return. That was the offense the entire game, and so we didn't get a good look at what they're going to do consistently throughout the season. So I think it's a little wild card with them. I think they are going to try to focus on the running game, get Devin Achane involved early in the game, try to get some quick passes, try to get the offense moving and get into a rhythm. And on the other side with Miami, I believe they're really a two tight end set type of offense. Parrish Jr. is their prime running back. And they have a pretty good wide receiving core, guys that just know how to get open, guys who are good in slants, good in the route concepts. Not a lot of big deep threats. So this isn't a kind of spread you out type of Ohio State like offensive scheme. But it's a hard no. I think they really are going to focus on the running game a lot. So that point total makes a lot of sense when you're looking like a 2021 game or something like that. Those are those kind of grind it out. Who started better? Who's better in the running game throughout the game, who kind of just who plays really good defense, So I think it's going to be one of those games, I believe. If it's higher scoring than that, I'd be a little surprised. That means that, both offenses are on their game, and especially A&M, depending on who the quarterback is that game and how they're playing and how the passing game is going, we could see more points. But right now, with what A&M has shown, that makes a lot of sense. With what Miami's shown, they played some very inferior opponents lately, so I can't really gauge exactly how much they're going to probably score here in, again, Kyle Field at night. So it's going to be loud, and it should affect their cadences and their calls. And so, yeah. So it's going to be interesting, though.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if it's over 45, I think that says more good about A&M than it does about Miami. Yeah. Because A&M has shown the ability in the Sam Houston game specifically to produce really big chunk plays. And we know they have the type of playmakers on the outside in Evan Stewart. Chris Marshall got wide open for a deep, a long play against Appalachian State. They weren't able to connect on Anaya Smith, Keith Brown. We know the speed, combine that with Devon Achane. We know the speed that they have on offense and their ability to produce explosive plays. So if it goes over 45, then that's either saying that both teams were able to, that A&M was able to be explosive enough to force Miami out of their shell, essentially. Because we've seen A&M try over the course of the last couple of weeks to be an explosive team. Exactly. They haven't been the type of team that they were last year or for most of Jimbo Fisher's time here, where it's been, hey, we're going to try to be, almost what Appalachian State was against A&M, where we're going to average 4 or 5 yards of play, and we're just going to beat you by being super consistent and having 15-play drives. That hasn't been A&M's offense. That's been the opposite of their offense. Whereas if they're going to get over 40, if the game goes over 45, it means that A&M has been able to be explosive, but they've also been able to be consistent enough to extend drives, possess the football, create big plays, and score points, and that has pulled Miami out of the way that they prefer to play offense a little bit too.
Yeah, and that's what I kind of neglected to say. They have the A&M has the explosive potential. What I was referencing is how I think they're trying to go against Miami this week. But yeah, if whoever is at quarterback, and we're saying that because we really don't know yet. I don't think anybody knows yet. And so whoever's at quarterback, they start clicking early. A&M has more explosive potential than Miami does. They have more weapons on the outside. They have one of the best slot receivers in the entire college football landscape. So the potential is always there. It's just how are they going to approach Miami from the start of the game, and what are they going to feel good with? What is going to work immediately right out of the gate?
Right, and I think the 45 number also says that Vegas doesn't have a ton of confidence in A&M's ability to be consistent offensively.
Exactly.
And they have, and to be fair, A&M hasn't given
that.
them a lot of reason to be optimistic about that.
Yeah. So
as we get into some prop lines from the game, there's some pretty interesting ones here. And so my favorite one of the list, and it's a little bit down the list, but we'll go to it first because I enjoy this idea a lot. It's over under 6 minutes before the first score in the game. So is either team gonna score before we reach 9 minutes on the clock in the first quarter? And so under 6 is at a minus 134. Okay. Over 6 is at a plus 100. So it's relatively even odds, but Vegas is essentially saying, hey, we think it's way more likely that somebody scores in the first 6 minutes of the game than somebody doesn't score in the first 6 minutes of the game. I love that these are the kinds of things that Vegas has given us lines.
Yeah, I mean, you got to make it interesting.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it's that's kind of funny. I mean, again, this could go either way because, like we saw with A&M last week, I don't even know when App State scored first. I know that. I know. Yeah, I remember that. The game was 17-14, but it took them a while, and A&M really didn't get past, except for really Haynes King's long, I think it was like a 30+ yard run near the hash mark. I think, honestly, it took a while, and it was really App State, in that pistol formation, running it down their throats, and that's where McKinley Jackson's absence really hurt them in that game.
Right.
And you could tell when they started get 3 or 4 yards each pop, it was like, okay, I mean, this is gonna get bad, because then he started scrambling for yards and started confusing the defense. But that's what killed them. You're facing a Miami offense was completely different. And they're going to come at their offensive approach completely, because they don't need to play like that for App State to score. App State had to, like you said on the pod before the App State game perfectly, this is what App State had to do perfectly to win the game. And they did all of that. I mean, this guy blew my mind. I was like, man, Joey said all of that last week, and they may have listened. I'm just kidding. But
I also said A&M was going to win by 35,
exactly.
So they didn't listen too much.
It's not like you're favoring that.
Yeah.
You did an excellent job of that. So it's like, that it could happen. I don't give that high percentage of occurring, but anything could happen. Again, I'm going to keep reiterating, this is a night game at Kyle Field. Anybody, I know Aggies know that, but all the other people watching it, you're going to hear, it's going to be one of the loudest stadiums in the country. And I know everybody likes to, compare theirs to everybody else's, and hell, in the state of Iowa, Iowa Hawkeyes, we're the loudest, and they are pretty loud, but they, it's going to affect the game. So really that bet does make sense, because if it affects them both, if it affects Miami immediately, and then A&M starts having one of those slow offensive games, they're never a first half team type of thing, then yeah, I mean, that could occur. I don't give it big odds, but it's something to think about for sure.
Yeah, for the record, nobody scored in the first quarter of the A&M App State game.
There we go.
Yeah, App State scored just after the turn into the second quarter.
Yes.
And A&M scored with 3:39 left in the first quarter against Sam Houston. Yeah. That was the touchdown pass to Yokeith Brown. So I sort of think that there's a chance that it's under, just because I think that the A&M offense will come out on a mission in their first drive to put points on the board on their first drive. And maybe that includes, going for a 4th down or 2 with, 4th and 1, 4th and 2, take advantage of the home field, all that kind of stuff. I think there's a pretty decent chance somebody scores before 6 minutes, but we'll wait and see on that one. Okay, and this next line goes a little bit alongside the conversation we were having with the over-under line. Will any team score 40 or more points in this game? Yes is plus 440, and no is minus 770.
Okay.
So extremely strong lean from Vegas in this scenario to saying nobody's going to score over 40 points in this game. So you combine this with the over-under, and this makes sense, right? If they thought somebody was going to score over 40 points, the over-under would be a lot higher. But so again, very strong indication from Vegas that they feel like this is going to be a low-scoring game. And my takeaway from that, it goes back to the over-under, the total line. This says more about a lack of clarity and confidence in the A&M offense than it does anything else about Miami or A&M's defense. In that, because with the talent that A&M has at the playmaking spots, and I've said this earlier, I'll say it again, if there was confidence in the quarterback play, the line would be much closer because A&M would be a threat to score 40 points in any game, any week against anybody, especially at home. And so that's my takeaway on that. What's your takeaway on the odds for somebody to score 40 points or more?
I agree with you 100%. It's one of those things where, again, the confidence with A&M's offense is nil right now. It's one of those situations where, again, you're playing in a primetime game, so you have no idea how the offense is going to operate. You have no idea how they're going to look, because you're right. If A&M comes in on a mission to prove that was a blip, that it happens, we're sorry to the fans, but we're going to give you a show tonight. And again, if the quarterback change does happen and someone like Max Johnson comes in and just starts having chemistry right away with the receivers, and they start moving the ball pretty quickly, and the run game starts I can't speak English, starts going at a high pace, and the offensive line starts blocking better and starts pushing guys off the line, then there's potential. That's a blowout. That's kind of a blowout scenario in my opinion if they score 40 points or more, and that's one of the things where that's a very, very small chance of that happening. But yeah, we've seen it happen before. I think back to Purdue against Ohio State, games like that where Purdue, I think, was unranked at the time. Ohio State had come in there and Purdue almost blew them out of the building, just based on, wanted to prove their worth. And we've seen a lot of games like that where teams that just something happened to them the week before, and they are, they understand, they let their fan base down, they let their team down, and they just find some type of fire in them to come out at home in a night game and just beat anybody. It doesn't matter who it is. So yeah, there's a small potential for that, but it makes sense that, you're not going to bet, a lot of money on that to happen, just based on what we've seen the last 2 weeks from A&M specifically, and comparing it with Miami. I don't see any case for that happening, because they played some very small opponents and they scored a lot of points, but they haven't done it in the explosive nature. It's been really those kind of basic blowout games where you're playing very, very way lesser competition, and you're just kind of going with the motions, and so just talent above what you're playing.
Absolutely, it's going to be really interesting to watch. We're really excited to see A&M have the chance to bounce back again at home at Kyle Field against Miami in prime time under the lights. It's going to be nuts in that place. And the recruiting list of visitors who are going to be there is going to be obnoxiously long and unbelievably star-studded. We've started to get some leaks out about who's going to be there. We'll probably cover a little bit of that tomorrow on the show. But for now, guys, thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for joining us. You can find me on Twitter at Joey Ikes. You can find Cameron on Twitter at Cameron Honesty, and that last name is OHNYSTY. You can find us both at aggieswire.usatoday.com, where we write about all things Texas A&M sports. Thanks again so much for making Locked On Aggies your first listen. You can find us on YouTube at Locked On Aggies. Leave us a comment there, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're trying to grow the channel to 1,000 subscribers by the Alabama game on October 8th. So we're getting close to 3 weeks from that. We're making some progress. We'd really love to get there. We appreciate you guys' help there. Find us on your podcast platform of choice. Leave us a rating and a review. And now that you've made us your first listen of the day, go check out Locked On SEC, where host Chris Gordy and the local experts of Locked On will take you around the SEC in 30 minutes or less. Make Locked On SEC your second listen. Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you tomorrow.